The spring air in Chicago carried a hint of possibility as Michael Reynolds adjusted his tie in the mirror of the Palmer House Hotel. At 32, he had never expected to find himself at an alumni networking event on a Thursday evening, but his former professor had insisted his presence would be valuable. Just show up, you never know who you might meet. Michael smoothed his tailored blazer, a perk of his growing success as a financial consultant, and headed downstairs to the ballroom. The room buzzed with conversation and clinking glasses as former University of Chicago graduates reconnected and exchanged business cards. Across the room, Ayanna Johnson stood alone near the bar, observing the crowd with quiet confidence. At 29, she had already made a name for herself at one of the city's respected law firms, specializing in corporate law. Her deep brown skin contrasted beautifully with her ivory cocktail dress, and her natural hair was styled in an elegant updo that framed her face perfectly. "White wine, please," she told the bartender, unaware of Michael's eyes finding her from across the room. Something about her commanded his attention, not just her beauty, though that was undeniable, but the way she carried herself with such self-assurance. Michael found himself moving toward her before he had fully decided to do so. "I'd recommend the red," he said, stepping beside her at the bar. "The white is a bit too sweet tonight." Ayanna turned, her eyes meeting his with a mixture of amusement and skepticism. "Is that so? And you're an expert on wine selections at alumni events?" Michael laughed, surprised by her directness. "Hardly. I'm just a guy who made the mistake 20 minutes ago. I'm Michael Reynolds, class of 2014. Ayanna Johnson, 2016, corporate law." She accepted her white wine from the bartender, but didn't take a sip. "Financial consulting," he offered. "Though tonight I'm wondering why I let my old professor talk me into coming to this thing." Ayanna's smile softened her professional demeanor. "Same reason as everyone else, I imagine. Connections, opportunities, free drinks. And unexpected conversations with interesting strangers," Michael added, raising his glass slightly. For the next 2 hours, they barely noticed the event happening around them. Their conversation flowed from career aspirations to favorite books, from childhood memories to dreams for the future. Michael learned that Ayanna had grown up on the south side of Chicago with parents who were both educators. She had worked her way through school with scholarships and determination, graduating near the top of her class. "And now you've got the big law firm career," Michael said admiringly. "Your parents must be proud." "They are," Ayanna acknowledged. "But they'd also remind me daily not to forget where I came from." "What about your family?" Michael told her about his upbringing in the northern suburbs, his father's successful dental practice, and his mother's role as a hospital administrator. He shared stories of his 2 younger sisters and the expectations his parents had always placed on him as the oldest child. "Golden boy burden," Ayanna nodded knowingly. "First-generation professional burden isn't much different. The weight of others' hopes can be heavy." As the event wound down, neither wanted the evening to end. They exchanged numbers under the pretense of professional networking, but both knew it was more. The next day, Michael called Ayanna, breaking the unspoken rule about waiting. They met for coffee that weekend, dinner the following Tuesday, and soon they were seeing each other regularly. Their differences became points of interest rather than division. She introduced him to soul food Sunday dinners with her family in South Shore, while he showed her his favorite hidden spots along the North Shore. 2 months into dating, they faced their first real challenge when Michael's mother made several uncomfortable comments at a family dinner, asking Ayanna questions about her culture and remarking on how well-spoken she was. In the car afterward, Michael apologized profusely. "I never brought anyone home who wasn't," he trailed off. "Who wasn't white?" Ayanna finished for him, her voice calm but firm. "Michael, if we're going to do this, you need to be able to have these conversations openly." That night marked a turning point. Michael began to see the world through different eyes, noticing the subtle ways people treated them differently when they were together, the assumptions strangers made, the extra scrutiny Ayanna faced in professional settings. Instead of driving them apart, these realizations drew them closer. By their 1-year anniversary, they had created a life together that bridged their different worlds, finding strength in what made them unique. What neither of them could know was how fragile such bridges could be, and how easily they could crumble under the right pressure. 2 years into their relationship, on a crisp autumn evening with Lake Michigan shimmering in the background, Michael dropped to one knee and asked Diana to marry him. The diamond ring caught the sunset's glow as tears filled her eyes. "Yes," she whispered, her voice steady despite the emotion filling her chest. "Yes, I'll marry you." Their engagement announcement was met with mixed reactions. Diana's family embraced Michael with warm hugs and celebratory toasts. Her father, a high school principal with a deep, resonant voice, pulled Michael aside. "You're marrying my daughter, not just her accomplishments," he said, his hand firm on Michael's shoulder. "Love her fully, or don't love her at all." Michael nodded, feeling both welcomed and warned. The response from Michael's family was more complicated. His sisters seemed genuinely happy, but his parents' congratulations came with tight smiles and concerned glances. That evening, his mother cornered him in the kitchen while Diana chatted with his sisters in the living room. "She's a lovely girl, Michael," his mother said, her voice low. "But are you sure about this? Marriage is hard enough without additional challenges." "Mom," Michael cut her off, "I'm marrying Diana. I love her. That's all that matters." His mother patted his cheek, a gesture that felt more patronizing than affectionate. "Of course, dear, we just want you to be happy." As wedding preparations began, the subtle tensions grew more apparent. When they toured venues, hosts would sometimes look to Michael first, assuming Diana couldn't afford the expensive locations. When they met with the high-end caterer his mother insisted upon, the staff directed all questions about pricing to Michael, despite Diana being the one with the legal expertise on contracts. "Did you notice that?" Diana asked as they left one such meeting. "Notice what?" Michael replied, genuinely confused. Diana sighed. "Never mind." The guest list became another point of contention. Michael's parents pushed for inviting numerous family friends and business associates, while Diana wanted a smaller, more intimate gathering. Michael found himself caught in the middle, trying to please everyone. "Your mother keeps asking if my entire family will be attending," Diana mentioned one evening as they reviewed RSVPs at their apartment. "What does she expect? That exclude my cousins?" "She's just trying to get the numbers right," Michael said, though he suspected there was more to his mother's questions. 5 months before the wedding, they attended his cousin's wedding in Lake Forest. It was an elaborate affair at a country club, with a string quartet and champagne fountains. Throughout the evening, Michael noticed the curious glances thrown their way. At the reception, he overheard a conversation between his aunt and another relative. "So brave of Michael," his aunt whispered. "I wonder what their children will look like." Michael pretended not to hear, but the comment stayed with him, an uncomfortable weight in his stomach. That night, Diana was quieter than usual on the drive home. "Your family doesn't think I belong in their world," she finally said, staring out the window. "That's not true," Michael protested, though his voice lacked conviction. "They just need time to get to know you better." Diana turned to look at him, her eyes searching his face. "It's been 2 years, Michael. How much more time do they need?" He reached for her hand and squeezed it gently. "After we're married, it'll be different. They'll see what I see." Diana nodded, but her doubt was visible in the slight furrow of her brow. The unspoken question lingered between them: would marriage really change anything? As wedding plans moved forward, Michael found himself increasingly torn between loyalty to his family and his love for Diana. He wanted both worlds to blend seamlessly, but reality proved more complicated than he had imagined. Neither of them realized that their greatest test wasn't in the planning. It was still to come. 3 weeks before the wedding, Michael traveled to Boston for a financial conference his firm considered essential. The trip came at the worst possible time. Wedding details needed finalizing, and Diana was overwhelmed with both wedding planning and a major case at her law firm. "It's just 3 days," Michael assured her at the airport drop-off. "I'll be back before you know it, and we can tackle the seating chart together." Diana nodded, kissing him goodbye. "Call me when you land." The conference began like any other: PowerPoint presentations, networking coffees, and business card exchanges. On the second day, during a panel about investment strategies, Michael noticed a woman asking particularly insightful questions from the third row. She had straight blonde hair that fell just past her shoulders and wore a tailored navy suit that marked her as someone who belonged in these circles. Later, at the evening mixer, he spotted her again at the bar, now wearing a cocktail dress that complemented her slim figure. Something about her reminded him of the women his mother had subtly pushed him toward before he met Ayanna. "Impressive question you asked today," Michael said, approaching her. She turned, offering a practiced smile. "Sarah Wickman," she said, extending her hand. "And you're Michael Reynolds. I recognized your name tag from the Robertson Financial Group." "Guilty as charged," he laughed, surprised she knew his company. "Your firm's growth strategy is exactly what I've been researching for my MBA thesis," she explained. "I'd love to pick your brain, if you don't mind." What began as professional conversation shifted to personal topics as they moved from the bar to a quiet table in the corner. Sarah was from Lake Forest, the same affluent Chicago suburb where many of Michael's family friends lived. She had attended the same private schools as his cousins and summered at the same Michigan resorts his family visited. "Small world," Michael said, feeling an odd comfort in these familiar references. He didn't mention Ayanna or the upcoming wedding. By the time they parted ways that evening, they had exchanged phone numbers under the pretense of professional networking. The next morning, Sarah texted him about meeting for coffee before the day's sessions. Coffee turned into lunch, and lunch extended so long they both missed the afternoon panels. There was an ease to their interaction that Michael found both familiar and exciting. "My family has a charity gala next month in Chicago," Sarah mentioned casually as they walked back to the hotel. "You should come as my guest." The invitation hung in the air between them. Michael knew he should mention his engagement, yet the words stuck in his throat. "I'd like that," he heard himself say instead. That night, when Ayanna called to discuss wedding details, Michael's responses were distracted and short. "Is everything okay?" she asked, concern evident in her voice. "Just tired from the conference," he lied, guilt gnawing at him. The following day, before returning to Chicago, Michael met Sarah for breakfast. Their goodbye lingered longer than appropriate, and when she hugged him, the scent of her perfume stayed with him on the flight home. Over the next week, Michael found himself comparing his life with Ayanna to the one he imagined with someone like Sarah. Text messages from Sarah became more frequent, filled with inside jokes from the conference and subtle hints about seeing each other again. Ayanna noticed the change in him. "You've been distant since Boston," she said one evening as they reviewed wedding RSVP cards. "What's going on?" "Nothing," Michael insisted, avoiding her eyes. "Just work stress." But as the days passed, his inner conflict grew. Sarah represented the path of least resistance, a world his family would embrace without question, a life without the subtle battles he and Ayanna faced daily. 10 days before the wedding, after another text exchange with Sarah, Michael made a decision that would change multiple lives forever. He sat on the edge of their bed, watching Ayanna organize her closet for their honeymoon, and felt a crushing weight of what he was about to do. "We need to talk," he said, his voice barely audible. Ayanna turned, the joy in her eyes fading as she registered his expression. She didn't yet know that their future together was about to shatter into pieces. "I can't marry you." 4 words that demolished 2 years of love and trust. Ayanna stood frozen, a sundress for their Bali honeymoon still clutched in her hands. "What?" she whispered, hoping she had misheard. Michael couldn't meet her eyes. "I'm sorry. I don't think we should get married." Ayanna slowly sat on the edge of the bed, her legs suddenly unable to support her. The room felt airless, as if all oxygen had been sucked out. "Is this a joke?" Her voice trembled. "The wedding is in 10 days, Michael." He shook his head, staring at the floor. "I've been having doubts. It wouldn't be fair to either of us to go through with it." "Doubts?" Ayanna repeated. "When did these doubts start?" "Boston." Michael's head snapped up, surprise evident in his face. "There's someone else?" Ayanna said. It wasn't a question. His silence was confirmation enough. Tears filled her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. "Who is she?" Ayanna asked, her voice eerily calm. "It doesn't matter," Michael mumbled. "This isn't about her. It's about us not being right for each other." Ayanna stood up, anger replacing shock. "After 2 years, 3 weeks before our wedding, you suddenly decide we're not right for each other. Don't insult my intelligence, Michael." "I didn't plan for this to happen," he protested weakly. "Get out," Ayanna said quietly. "Just get out." Michael gathered some clothes and left without another word. The click of the apartment door closing echoed with finality. The next morning brought the brutal reality of unwinding wedding plans. Ayanna sat at her kitchen table, phone in hand, staring at the list of people she needed to call. The venue, the caterer, the florist, the photographer. Then came the harder calls, to her parents, her bridesmaids, her extended family. Her mother arrived within an hour of hearing the news, walking into Ayanna's apartment to find her daughter surrounded by half-packed honeymoon luggage. "Baby girl," she said, pulling Ayanna into her arms. Only then did Ayanna allow herself to truly break down, sobbing against her mother's shoulder. "What did I do wrong, Mom?" she cried. "Nothing," her mother said firmly. "This is not about you being wrong. This is about him being weak." The day that should have been their rehearsal dinner, Ayanna received a text from her cousin Jasmine. "You need to see this." Attached was a screenshot from Instagram. Michael at a rooftop bar with a blonde woman, his arm around her waist, both smiling brightly at the camera. The caption read, "New beginnings with this amazing man, #blessed." Ayanna stared at the image until her vision blurred. The woman was beautiful in that effortless way that society celebrated. Straight blonde hair, slender figure, features that matched conventional beauty standards. She looked like she belonged in Michael's world, like she would never make his mother uncomfortable. The betrayal burned deeper than Ayanna had thought possible. That weekend, she shut off her phone and retreated to her parents' house. Her father's quiet anger and her mother's protective concern wrapped around her like a shield. Friends and family came by with food, with hugs, with righteous indignation on her behalf. "You dodged a bullet," her best friend Tamika insisted. "Any man who would do this was never worthy of you." The words were meant to comfort, but they couldn't fill the hollow space in Ayanna's chest. When she returned to work the following Monday, she felt the weight of curious stares and whispered conversations. The firm had given her time off for what would have been her honeymoon. Now she had to face colleagues who knew her wedding had been cancelled at the last minute. "Ms. Johnson, your 10 o'clock is here," her assistant said cautiously, treating her like she might shatter. Ayanna straightened her spine and adjusted her blazer. "Send them in," she replied, her voice professional despite the storm inside her. At night, alone in her apartment with Michael's things removed, she allowed herself 1 hour to cry. Just 1 hour, then she would focus on rebuilding. The wedding dress hung in her closet like a ghost, a reminder of dreams that wouldn't come true. She didn't know yet that life was about to teach both her and Michael lessons neither had anticipated. 3 months after leaving Ayanna, Michael's life with Sarah seemed picture perfect. They moved into a stylish apartment in Lincoln Park, attended society events together, and were welcomed warmly into each other's social circles. His parents, especially his mother, made no effort to hide their approval. "Sarah is just delightful," his mother gushed during Sunday brunch. "Her mother and I are on the same hospital charity board, you know." Michael nodded, ignoring the uncomfortable feeling in his stomach. He had barely thought about Ayanna in weeks, or so he told himself. Sarah fit seamlessly into his world. She knew the right people, wore the right clothes, and said all the right things. When they visited his family's lake house, his father took her boating while his mother showed her family photo albums. There were no awkward questions about cultural differences or subtle comments about fitting in. Yet something felt hollow beneath the surface perfection, something Michael couldn't quite name. One evening, while Sarah organized a dinner party for Michael's colleagues, he overheard her on the phone in their bedroom. "No, Mother, don't worry. I got this under control," Sarah was saying. "Michael's firm is expanding, and his family connections are exactly what we discussed. Trust me, by next year I'll be wearing an engagement ring worth at least what Jessica's got." Michael stepped back from the door, his chest tightening. Was he just a career move to her? A strategic alliance? That night, watching Sarah charm his boss and coworkers, Michael saw her in a new light. Her laughter seemed calculated, her stories perfectly crafted to impress. He realized she had never once shared a genuine vulnerability with him, never revealed any true struggle or doubt. The following week, Michael found himself driving past Ayanna's law firm building. He slowed down, remembering how she used to call him during lunch breaks, her voice excited about case developments, even when he didn't understand all the legal terminology. With Ayanna, there had been substance beneath the surface, real discussions, genuine disagreements, authentic connection. Sarah's true colors emerged more clearly when Michael's oldest friend Jamal visited from New York. Jamal, whose parents had immigrated from Nigeria, had been Michael's roommate in college. The two had remained close, though distance made their visits rare. "Your apartment is very tasteful," Jamal commented, glancing around at the carefully designed space that bore Sarah's unmistakable influence. Later, when Michael returned from picking up takeout for dinner, he overheard Sarah speaking to her sister on the phone. "His friend is here from New York." "Yes, the black one I told you about," she said in a low voice. "So awkward. I mean, Michael isn't like that usually. His taste is much more refined now." Michael stood frozen, food bags in hand, as Sarah continued. "Don't worry, once we're married, you'll outgrow these college friendships. My father says it's all about surrounding yourself with the right people if you want to advance." The casual racism in her words hit Michael like a physical blow. Was this what Ayanna had experienced from his family? Had he been equally blind to their subtle prejudices? That night, after Jamal left and Sarah went to bed, Michael sat alone in their living room, confronting uncomfortable truths. He had left Ayanna partly because life with Sarah promised fewer complications. No more awkward family dinners, no more curious stares from strangers, no more conversations about race and privilege that made him uncomfortable. He had chosen the easy path, only to discover it led somewhere hollow. The next morning, Sarah left a list of society events they needed to attend for networking purposes. Each one was carefully selected for its potential to advance their social standing. Michael stared at the list, seeing clearly for the first time the transactional nature of their relationship. What had seemed like a perfect match was revealing itself to be a calculated arrangement. Michael had left genuine love for a relationship built on appearances and advantage, and the realization left him feeling more alone than he had ever been. Meanwhile, across town, Ayanna was beginning to rebuild her life, unaware that the man who had broken her heart was discovering exactly what he had thrown away. 5 months after the wedding that never happened, Ayanna walked into her law firm's annual holiday party alone. She wore a deep red dress that complemented her skin tone and a smile that only slightly hinted at the pain she still carried. Partners and colleagues greeted her warmly, many with a touch of concern in their eyes. "Ayanna, you look stunning," said Marcus, a senior partner who had taken her under his wing. "How are you really doing?" "Better every day," she replied, and meant it. The sharp edges of heartbreak had begun to soften. She no longer woke up forgetting Michael was gone, no longer reached for her phone to text him good news. Across town, Michael attended a similar holiday gathering at Sarah's parents' country club. He stood uncomfortably in a corner, watching Sarah work the room. 3 champagne glasses in, he could no longer ignore how calculated her every interaction seemed, laughing at the right moments, touching important people's arms just long enough to establish connection, dropping names and figures that positioned her as someone to know. "Darling, come meet Congressman Willis," Sarah called, waving him over. "I was just telling him about your investment strategy for tech startups." Michael obediently joined the conversation, saying all the right things while feeling increasingly hollow inside. Later, in the bathroom, he stared at his reflection in the mirror. Who had he become? The man looking back seemed like a stranger wearing an expensive suit. Days later, Michael discovered something that shattered what little remained of his illusions about Sarah. While searching for a charger in her desk drawer, he found papers detailing significant debt. Credit cards maxed out, shopping habits far beyond her income, and a small personal loan with his name forged as co-signer. "What is this?" He confronted her that evening, papers spread across their dining table. Sarah's usually perfect composure cracked. "It's nothing. Just some temporary financial issues." "You forged my signature," Michael said, his voice low with anger. "And these credit card statements, $30,000 on clothes and jewelry in the last 2 months? Image is everything in my world, Michael," she snapped, dropping her sweet facade. "You think your firm would have promoted you if you didn't look the part? If I didn't help you look the part? Our relationship was just about appearances for you, wasn't it?" he asked, the truth dawning on him fully. "About what I could provide." Sarah's laugh was bitter. "Don't be naive. What relationship isn't transactional? At least I'm honest about it. You wanted a partner who made your life easier, who fit the image your family approved of. I wanted someone with career potential and family connections. We both got what we wanted." The words hung in the air between them, ugly in their truth. Michael had left Ayanna not just for another woman, but for an easier life. One without the complicated conversations about race and identity, without the supple disapproval from his family, without having to examine his own privileges and biases. "I'm moving out," he said quietly. That weekend, Michael packed his things and checked into a hotel. Alone in the anonymous room, he thought about Ayanna for the first time in months without pushing the memories away. He remembered her intelligence, her integrity, the way she challenged him to be better. He remembered her family's Sunday dinners where conversations were deep and laughter was genuine. Most of all, he remembered how real she was. No calculation, no hidden agenda. Meanwhile, Ayanna sat in her apartment reviewing a major case file. Her phone buzzed with a message from a law school classmate who had set her up on a blind date for the following weekend. She hesitated, then typed back, "I'll be there." The pain wasn't gone, but she was moving forward. Her mother had told her, "Sometimes people leave your life so better ones can enter." For the first time, Ayanna was ready to believe this might be true. Neither knew that their paths would soon cross again, with both of them changed by the roads they had traveled separately. 8 months after their broken engagement, Michael stood outside Ayanna's law firm building in the rain. He had rehearsed what to say a dozen times, yet still felt unprepared. After the disaster with Sarah ended, with her moving out and threatening to sue him before her family quietly settled matters, Michael had spent months in therapy confronting uncomfortable truths about himself. The revolving door turned, and suddenly Ayanna was there, elegant in a gray suit, her natural hair styled in a sophisticated updo. She stopped short when she saw him, surprise quickly replaced by a carefully neutral expression. "Michael," she said, neither a question nor a greeting. "Ayanna," he replied, his mouth dry. "Could we talk? Just for a few minutes." She hesitated, then gestured to a coffee shop across the street. 10 minutes. They sat by the window, rain streaming down the glass between them and the busy Chicago street. Ayanna ordered green tea, Michael black coffee. The silence stretched between them. "You look well," he finally said. "What do you want, Michael?" No anger in her voice, just weariness. He took a deep breath. "To apologize. What I did was unforgivable. I hurt you in the worst possible way, and I spent months understanding why I made those choices." Ayanna studied him, her expression unreadable. "And why did you?" "The easy answer is that I was weak and selfish," Michael said. "The harder truth is that I was afraid. Afraid of standing up to my family's subtle racism, afraid of the work our relationship required, afraid of examining my own privileges and biases." A flash of surprise crossed Ayanna's face at his bluntness. "With Sarah, everything seemed easier at first," he continued. "No uncomfortable family dinners, no subtle comments from friends, no feeling like I needed to defend our relationship. But it was all surface, there was nothing real underneath." "So you've come for forgiveness," Ayanna said flatly, "to ease your conscience." Michael shook his head. "No, I don't expect forgiveness. I don't deserve it. I just wanted you to know that I understand what I threw away, and that losing you taught me painful but necessary lessons." Ayanna's fingers tightened around her teacup. "Do you know what it was like for me, canceling a wedding 3 weeks before? Facing everyone's pity? Wondering what was wrong with me that made you leave?" "There was nothing wrong with you," Michael said quickly. "It was." "I know that now," she interrupted. "But it took months of therapy to truly believe it. You didn't just break my heart, Michael. You made me question my worth." The quiet strength in her voice made him ashamed. He had imagined this conversation many times, but hadn't fully considered the depth of pain he had caused. "I'm sorry," he said again, the words painfully inadequate. Ayanna was quiet for a moment. "I heard about Sarah from mutual friends. The debt, the forgery. That must have been difficult. Not compared to what I put you through." A small smile touched Ayanna's lips. "At least you recognize that." Outside, the rain had stopped. A ray of sunlight broke through the clouds, casting patterns on their table. "I'm seeing someone," Ayanna said suddenly. "David. He's a pediatric surgeon. We've been dating for 2 months." Michael felt a sharp pain in his chest but nodded. "Is he good to you?" "Yes, he sees me for who I am. His family is wonderful." She paused. "He doesn't make me feel like I should be grateful that he chose me despite my race." The pointed comment hit its mark. Michael had never said those words, but his actions had implied them. "I'm glad," he said sincerely. "You deserve that." Ayanna glanced at her watch and stood. "I have a meeting." "Thank you for the apology. I hope you find what you're looking for, Michael." As she gathered her things, Michael asked, "Do you think you'll ever forgive me?" Ayanna looked at him directly, her eyes clear and honest. "I already have. Forgiveness was necessary for my healing. But forgiveness doesn't mean a second chance." She walked away, straight-backed and confident. Michael watched her go, understanding with complete clarity what he had lost. Not just a beautiful woman, but a partner of substance and integrity. Someone whose worth he had failed to recognize until it was too late. For the first time, he accepted that some mistakes cannot be undone, only learned from. It was a hard lesson, but one he needed. 1 year after the wedding that never happened, Ayanna stood in her new office at Morrison & Bennett, a prestigious law firm in Washington, D.C. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a stunning view of the capital city, a physical representation of how far she had come. Cardboard boxes waited to be unpacked, but she took a moment to appreciate this milestone. Her phone buzzed with a message from David. "Dinner tonight to celebrate your first day? I'm thinking that Italian place you loved when we visited last month." Ayanna smiled, typing back, "Perfect. See you at 7. Her relationship with David had grown steadily over the past 5 months. Unlike Michael, David was comfortable discussing race and privilege. His Nigerian-American family had welcomed her warmly, no hidden discomfort or subtle questions about her background. Most importantly, David saw her, truly saw her for exactly who she was. The promotion to senior counsel had come unexpectedly. When her boss recommended her for the position in Washington, Ayanna had hesitated, thinking of what she would leave behind in Chicago. But David, finishing his medical fellowship, had encouragingly said, "DC has hospitals too, you know." His willingness to consider relocating for her career spoke volumes about the partnership they were building. As Ayanna arranged family photos on her desk, her assistant knocked on the open door. "Ms. Johnson, these just arrived for you," the young woman said, carrying a simple arrangement of yellow roses. Ayanna's favorite flowers, a detail few people knew. The card read, "Congratulations on your well-deserved success. The legal world of DC is lucky to have you. Michael." Ayanna stared at the signature, a complicated mix of emotions rising within her. She hadn't spoken to Michael since their coffee shop meeting 4 months ago. Across the country in Chicago, Michael sat in a community center on the south side, surrounded by high school students. After leaving his financial firm, he had started a nonprofit focused on financial literacy for underserved communities. The work paid less but fulfilled him in ways his previous career never had. "Mr. Reynolds, can you check my budget worksheet?" asked Tasha, a bright 16-year-old with dreams of becoming an accountant. Michael reviewed her work, impressed by her careful planning. "This is excellent, Tasha. You've really considered all the angles." His phone chimed with a LinkedIn notification. Ayanna Johnson had been promoted to senior counsel at Morrison & Bennett in Washington, D.C. Without hesitation, he ordered flowers to be sent to her new office, knowing she deserved recognition for her achievement. That evening, Michael met his parents for dinner. Their relationship had changed dramatically over the past year, with difficult but necessary conversations about their subtle racism and the role it had played in his failed relationship with Ayanna. "We saw Sarah at the country club last weekend," his mother mentioned cautiously. "She's engaged to Thomas Whitfield." "I hope they'll be happy," Michael said sincerely, feeling nothing but relief that Sarah had moved on to her next target. "Your father and I have been talking," his mother continued, "about the work your foundation is doing. We'd like to contribute, if that's all right." It was a small step, but an important one. His parents were trying, in their way, to understand the world he now inhabited. One where privilege came with responsibility, where differences were celebrated rather than merely tolerated. In Washington, Ayanna and David clinked glasses over candlelight. "To new beginnings," David toasted, his eyes warm with admiration. "To knowing our worth," Ayanna added. Later that night, as David slept beside her, Ayanna found herself thinking briefly about Michael. She hoped he had found his way to becoming the man he could be, one who recognized his own biases and worked to overcome them, not for her sake, but for his own, and for whoever might love him next. The journey had been painful for them both, but necessary. Michael had left his black bride for another woman, not knowing that his choice would ultimately lead to the most important lessons of his life about love, integrity, and the courage it takes to face uncomfortable truths. And Ayanna had lost a fiancé but found herself stronger, wiser, and ready for a love that never asked her to be less than who she was. Sometimes, the most difficult endings make way for the most beautiful beginnings.